approach to your infertility, male infertility problems. I bring greetings from Cochin and Cochin ONG Society. Before going to anything, we must know about the prevalence of that. 50% of the couples suffer from infertility, as you all know. That range varies different studies. Among the male factors responsible for the 30 to 50% in different studies, and 5 to 10% of males are infertile or subfertile. That is another study. So there are different types of classification. Most accepted is that out of that 40% will be the reason male alone, or then there will be unexplained 10%, both will be 10%. This is the rough variation. Some studies say 1/3 is due to male. So before going to anything about male infertility, we must know about HPG axis. That is, it is a hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis, similar to HPO axis in the female. So what we have to know is that from the brain, hypothalamus GnRH is produced in a pulsatile fashion. From the pituitary, FSH and LH is produced. And FSH stimulate the Sertoli cell to produce the sperms, and LH stimulate the Leydig cell to produce the testosterone, which has got a negative feedback effect. That is similar to the females. And this is another same thing, pictorial representation, how the FSH produces sperms and LH stimulates the testosterone production. So in males, sperm is produced in the testis, and from there it goes to the epididymis, and from there it travels and it goes through the ejaculatory duct, and it comes through the penis. That is a transport of the sperm. Roughly takes about 72 days for one sperm to mature in the human gonadal system. So coming to the different etiology of the male factor infertility, varicocele is told in different studies told different way. 35%, idiopathic 25%, infections 10%, genetic 10%, endocrinology 1 to 5%, immunology 1 to 5%, obstruction, development, and lifestyle like smoking, diet, height, that varies in different studies. So when the infertile couple comes, first we might take a detailed history of it, whether it is an infertile female comes, it must be always a couple approach. So both male and female has to be there. Sometimes, a lot of times, when because of the PCO prevalence or the radiologist diagnosing PCOS for the female, they comes to telling that I am having PCO, or even if their cycles are regular. But whatever be the reason, even if there is obvious female reason, that depends. Everything about the male also has to be done. So infertility must be a couple of approaches. The male history has to be taken and evaluated along with the female. In the history, we must look into the duration of the infertility, previous any history of pregnancy, any developmental problem is there, medical or surgical, any history is there, any sexual problem is there, or any family history. And then we must have a detailed physical examination. And then comes the semen analysis, and in needed cases only endocrine test or genetic test, and surgical evaluation and the sperm. I'll come to that separately. So among the history, most important is the childhood and the developmental history. Bilateral undescended testis or testicular torsion is one thing which, unless we take the proper history, it will be missed. And if there is a mumps, now most of the people tell they had slightly at least once they had mumps or not. But it must be, history must be whether it is associated, it was associated with orchitis, and history of perineal surgery like herniorrhaphy, and there was delayed in onset of puberty, or the secondary sexual characters, onset of axillary pubic hairs, or when they started shaving, all those things. Coming to the medical history, systemic illness like hepatic or renal failure history is very important. Gonadotoxins like sulfasalicin, cimetidine, nitrofurantoin, chemotherapeutic agents, anabolic androgen history is very important. Thermal injury is important, whether the smoking, alcohol, or the substance abuse is there. The surgical history, I again want to emphasize herniorrhaphy or orchidopexy, or any peritoneal or bladder neck surgery, which can lead to retrograde ejaculation. These all are important. Coming to the physical examination, we must have a general appearance how it is, whether there is associated gynecomastia, how the axillary and pubic hair is, testis volume and consistency, epididymis, whether it is indurated, whether it is cystic or any fullness is there, and varicocele, is there any associated varicocele, whether vas is palpable or not, whether there is bearded vas is there, and in doubtful cases, digital rectal examination also. So this is the from the genital examination. One thing we have to see is the testis, epididymis, and vas. Testis, we have to see whether it is small or soft, that is significant of the testicular impairment. Epididymis, whether it is distended, that tell there is some obstructive in the ejaculatory or the sperm drainage from the pathway from the testis. Whether vas, whether it is absent or thickened, these are the things we have to see in the genital examination. And associated things like phimosis is there, paraphimosis is there, hypospadiasis is there, also distended epididymis we discussed, or discontinuation of the vas, or other varicocele or hydrocele is there, we have to clearly see. Coming to the investigation part, the basic investigation most important is the semen analysis. It must be ideally done from a proper lab, or at least I'll come to that separately. Then doubtful, then whether any associated diabetes is there, and if there is semen is compromised, definitely we have to go for an FISTEL-1 endocrine investigation, that is the FSH. And really bad semen or asuspermia patients, we have to go for karyotyping or violin emission. Post-coital test, I just put here because even though our COG tells that it is not absolutely necessary, I routinely do the post-coital test. That tells whether the sexual function is normal, or the sperm, how is it is reaching, the importance of the sexual coitus is emphasized, how it is properly occurring. And if the post-coital test, if you see good sperms within 12 hours, after 2 hours of the intercourse, and the good secretions, cervical secretions there, that clearly tells that there we have to look into the other features like ovulatory factors or any mechanical factors affecting the fertility. And coming in detail about the semen analysis, it must be collected after 2 days, within 7 days of abstinence, and evaluated within 1 hour of ejaculation, and examine 2 to 3 samples to obtain the baseline if parameters are abnormal. There is multitude of methods available, but it is of utmost importance to follow WHO criteria for uniform reporting, and assessment of morphology need rigorous training, strict rigor criteria to be used to assess the morphology. And this is the semen analysis WHO criteria. I just highlight the volume must be between 2 to 6 ml, count at least 15 million per ml. Motility is more than 50% with vigorous forward movement in 2 to 3 hours. Motility grade 2 or above, I will come to that separately. Morphology, there must be at least 5% of the normal forms. And augmentation must not be significant, and WBC must not be significant. And this is the latest reference, WHO 2010. It is definitely lower than the previous release value. The problem with WHO semen analysis 2010 is that it is derived from 2,000 men from 8 nations with partners of time to pregnancy of less than 12 months. But the problem is that they have not taken the people of Afro-Asian population to come to that diagnosis, to the reference value. That is one drawback with that. And this is the lower reference value of the same semen analysis. If you compare that with the previous 1999 or 92, you can see how the minimal references come down and how the motility part has come down. But one problem what we have seen is that in the WHO 2010 reference, they are taking A grade and B grade together as 32%. But the previous ones all taking as grade A as 25%. What the problem sometimes is that sometimes the grade A will be very less, but together it will be more than 32%. Then we have to report it as normal. But sometimes there may not be very few progressive motor spleen. That is one thing. And leukocyte count, everything is same, and the morphology, normal forms, they're telling less than 5, that is being taken. The problem is that I have not taken the Afro-Asian population for this. So while going for semen analysis, always exclude any recent febrile illness. If there is any history of a recent febrile illness, we have to repeat the semen analysis after 4 weeks interval. More than one analysis when abnormal semen. Abstinence of 2 to 3 days according to the sexual habit. Never more than 5 or 7. Some people tell 5, some people it is 7. And masturbation there must be suitable surroundings, not the bathroom. There must be proper room so that patient can relax and collect. There must be dedicated lab and lab technician, that is andrology lab. Always stain the sample to differentiate the pus cells and differentiate the morphology. Give more importance to motility and morphology rather than the count. So the thing what we have to see is that values are able to solely distinguish the fertile and infertile women. Although morphology was suggested to be the most important, we cannot tell above this you can conceive or less than this you cannot conceive. In persons of more than one altered semen parameter significantly increases the risk of infertility. Man semen characters need to be interpreted in conjunction with this clinical information. In azoospermic patients, diagnosis must be confined by lack of any spermatozoa on centrifuge seminal fluid on 2 separate occasions at high-powered microscopic field evaluation. WHO recommends centrifugation of 15 minutes at 30 or greater, and then to see whether it, and to comment as specifically it has azoospermia in those patients. So next thing is that semen analysis must be always studied. It is authority based. Normal parameters even doesn't mean they are always fertile, and severe OAT also can be fertile. And infertile to one female can be fertile to her because there is other cervical factors how the sperm survive also play into the factors. And this is one picture of an abnormal sperms which we saw about 2 years back. Almost all the sperms had 2 or 3 tails in that patient, and we had to resort into the ICSI procedure to select the best sperm out of that and to get pregnancy. So what are the results or nomenclature what you get for the semen analysis? Normospermia, normal ejaculation based on concentration, motility and morphology of sperms. Oligozoospermia, when the concentration is less than 20. That is, all this is I took from the older one, now it is 15. Severe oligospermia, concentration of the sperm is less than 3 million per ml. Asthenozoospermia, motility of less than 50% of A and B, or grade A motility less than 30. Teratozoospermia, where the normal morphology is less than 30. These all are from the previous WHO. And oligoacidosis defects in concentration, motility, and morphology of the sperms. Aspermia, there is no ejaculate. Hemospermia, there is red cells in the ejaculate. Pyospermia, when white blood cells in ejaculate at concentration 1 million per ml. So endocrine evaluation, when is it is indicated? If the semen concentration is less than 10 million per ml, or if there is erectile dysfunction, if it is hypospermia, that is semen volume is less than 1 ml, if there is signs and symptoms of endocrinopaths or hypogonadism. These are the indications for the hormonal investigations. The most important is the FSH, and also if possible, we can do the LH and testosterone. And in isolated spermatogenic failure, FSH alone will be increased. Testicular failure, FSH and LH will be increased. Testosterone may be normal or decreased. But in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, FSH and LH and testosterone all will be less. That is very important to diagnose those patients. I'll come to that separately. So if you look into the FSH, in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, FSH is less than 3. And if it is compromised testicular function, it is more than 8. And then less testicular function is normal, means it is between 3 and 8. And oligoacidotertospermia with the high FSH, definitely assisted reproductive technique is indicated because it implies testicular function is really compromised. So major causes of testicular function is the compromise. It can be testicular or pre-testicular or post-testicular. Also rarely it can be sexual dysfunction can also be there. So coming to pre-testicular, it can be hypothalamic disease like hypogonadotropin deficiency like Kalaman syndrome, or pituitary disease or pituitary insertions, or hyperprolactinemia, or exogenous hormones like anabolic steroids, glucocorticoid excess, or hypothyroidism. Testicular can be congenital or acquired. Congenital like chromosomal Klinefelters or Y chromosome microdeletions, or rarely Noonan syndrome or cryptorchidism. Acquired, it can be injured like injuries like orchitis, torsion, or trauma, or varicocele, or systemic disease like renal failure or liver failure, or chemotherapy or radiotherapy, or testicular tumors, or rarely idiopathic. And post-testicular can be cystic fibrosis, congenital absence of vas, that is also known as CBA, where the congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens, and acquired like vasectomy, infection like chlamydia, gonorrhea, or iatrogenic like vascular injury, or disorders of sperm function or motility, or maturation defects, and coming to the another, this I put deliberately this classification because in this classification you can see the incidence is varying about the incidence. There is some studies telling varicocele is almost equally high, but this is one latest classification where the idiopathic or no demonstrable causes identified, and next comes the varicocele with 12%. So I just put it to tell that if there is varicocele, the best is to diagnose clinically, and doubtful cases only we have to send for a Doppler. Otherwise, best is for clinical evaluation, and it is one of the varicocele repair is one of the most commonly done surgery in male infertility, especially in large varicocele or in moderate oligoacidotarcospermia with normal FSH and normal testicular size. Usually the FSH function will be normal. Very, very rarely only FSH will be elevated with only with gross varicocele only. And so what we have to see is that we have to counsel the patient how far the sperm parameters is affected, how far the varicocele, how large is the varicocele is there, because even if you do the surgery, varicocele surgery, testicular sperm parameters may not improve, or the patient may not conceive normally also. So that we have to counsel according to the varicocele grade and how far the OAT is in that patient. And the most acceptable is a sublingual microscopic surgery, even though people have tried laparoscopy, but most accepted is sublingual microscopic surgery. So the importance is that it must be done properly, microscopic surgery, because otherwise lymphatics will get tired and patient can have a delayed complication as hydrocele, and that will affect the future testicular function. So ultrasound examination is in only doubtful cases like total ultrasound with Doppler to see the testicular size, varicocele and testicular tumor, and transrectal ultrasound only to identify dilated ejaculate ducts in cases of obstruction. Next, other surgeries like vasovasostomy or vasoepidural vasostomy is done in vasectomized patients, and it is a prolonged surgery, and the importance, and it is also very costly, it is time consuming microscopic surgery. Nowadays, because of advent of the ART procedure, we can retrieve easily the sperms from in those patients from the epididymis. So the role is coming less. And transurethral resection of ejaculate duct in men with ejaculate duct obstruction also in very few cases. Varicocele we have already discussed, or cupexy in cryptorchidism, preferably done in less than 2 years of age and before the testicular damage occurs. And vibratory stimulation for electroejaculation, neurological dysfunction patients only. So this is the azoospermia, that is also pre-testicular, testicular, and post-testicular. Post-testicular means it is obstructive azoospermia. So if the patient comes with azoospermia, we must definitely, the first thing is to examine the testis. If it is a peanut size testis, small testis, definitely the chance of retrieving the sperm is very less. And hypogonadric hypogonadism, if the FSH value is less than 3. And the obstructive azoospermia usually and FSH is normal, and normal testicular size is usually seen. And non-obstructive azoospermia, normal or reduced testicular size with high FSH and testicular function is compromised. So testicular biopsy is indicated in those patients, and if you can retrieve the sperm, we can go ahead and counsel the patient for ART procedures. Otherwise, we have to, depending on the testicular size and the FSH value, we can have to counsel whether we can go for testicular aspiration. I'll come to that separately. That's why step by step we will go with that. And pre-testicular can be genetic abnormality, idiopathic, isolated deficiency, isolated FSH deficiency, and prolactin excess. Testicular failure can be due to genetic abnormality or bilateral angulation testis or Sertoli-Cell syndrome, or history of any gonotoxins like radiation or chemical or drugs. Very, very rarely only varicose causes severe testicular failure, and orchitis also rarely can cause. And coming to the obstructive azoospermia, this is important because this is the condition where we can retrieve good sperms which are normal, almost normal genetical sperm from the testis or epidermis. The conditions can be epidermal obstruction like congenital epidermal obstruction, or acquired like post-infective epidermitis or epidermolysis. The vast difference, as we described, congenital bilateral abscess of vast difference, or post-surgical hernia surgery or scrotal surgery or vasectomy. And ejaculatory duct obstruction like prostatic cysts or post-infective or post-surgical like bladder neck surgeries. The importance, as I told, is obstructive lesions of seminal tract should be suspected in azoospermia or severely oligospermic patients with normal size testes with normal endocrine parameters. And sperm retrieval, we'll get good sperms in those patients, most of the patients, by either PISA, that is percutaneous epidermal sperm aspiration, or testicular sperm aspiration like this. I'll come to that in a few moments. And obstruction very rarely can be due to retitestis, epididymis, vas, or ejaculatory duct. Surgical treatment like vasal block, ejaculatory duct obstruction like epididymal obstruction can produce, but nowadays more role for how you can retrieve the sperm in those patients. And if you can retrieve the sperm, you can do the ICSI for them. As this is the same picture, if there is any obstruction, we can retrieve the sperm from the epididymis or from the testis in those patients. And it is the most ideal case for ART because sperm are genetically normal and structurally normal, and patient usually comes early to you. And non-obstructive azoospermia, testic size will be small or soft, and the FSH will be high or in the upper limit. And if you do the testicular biopsy in those patients, it can come as atrophic testis, Sertoli-Cell syndrome, or maturation arrest, or hypospermatogenesis. XC is possible in only 30 to 50% of the patients if you can retrieve the sperms. And regarding the retrieval of the sperm, I'll go first with the epidermal aspiration. Local anesthesia with sedation or regional block can be used. 19-inch needle attached with the syringe is used. Usually we can aspirate very easily, especially if it is a distended epidermis. This is a simple OPD procedure. It is very effective procedure, which is very inexpensive. There is no need for any microsurgical experience or incision. It's a blind procedure. And scrotal hematoma have to anticipate complication if we are not careful. Most of the times, if it is obstructive, we can retrieve the sperm. And coming to the testicular sperm aspiration, that is local anesthesia with sedation or regional block. Scalp vein set is used, usually 18G with 20 ml syringe, and removal of intact seminiferous tubules, and it condense, and it also doesn't need any incision or microsurgical experience. And volume of the testis usually, if it is adequate and if the consistency is good, we can retrieve good sperms. But in non-obstructive azoospermia, where the FSH is high, the size, as we told, size may be a normal or less than normal. Biopsy can be done. But most of the times, if we cannot retrieve the sperm, we have to go for a microscopic testicular sperm extraction. It is known as microtissue. We have to depend on the operative microscope. We have to we have to open the testis, and it is usually done by the urologist. And we have to identify the sites of sperm production based on the diameter of the seminiferous tubules. And we have to identify by the color also of the testicular tubules. It's a microsurgical approach where we have to preserve the testicular vasculature as far as possible and small quantity of tissue is excised. This is the pictorial representation, how you open the testis and see and how it is done. Usually the procedure lasts for 1 to 2 hours. And usually the problem is that it has to be done on the day or 1 day prior to the ovum, because those sperms, when you get for microtisa, we cannot repeat the procedure again because a lot of testicular damage occurs, and antibodies also can be produced, anti-sperm antibodies. And if you can retrieve the sperm, that sperm we have to use the same day or within up to 12 hours of incubation to do the ICSI procedure to the oocyte when required. That is the one disadvantage with the microtisa. We cannot preserve, cryopreserve the sperms obtained by the microtisa procedure. Coming to genetic disorders, knowledge of the genetic abnormalities in fertility is mandatory so that correct advice can be given to couples seeking infertility tablet with problems with severe male factor infertility. There are different studies telling us different incidents. I'm not going to that. One of the commonest thing is the Klinefelter syndrome. Adult men with Klinefelter syndrome have small or firm testes usually. Another is a cystic fibrosis, which is a fatal autosomal recessive disorder. This is one of the most common genetic disorders associated with male infertility. Standard karyotypic analysis should be offered to all men with damaged spermatogenesis who are seeking fertility by the IVF. That is the rule in most of the European countries. What here we follow is if it is severe male factor infertility, we go for 1 cycle of the ICSI procedure, and then if the fertilization is poor or the severe sperm retrieved is very bad, before attempting the next cycle, better to advise them for a genetic studies. What routinely advised is to go for a karyotyping and Y deletion. The importance is that if there is a karyotyping defect like XXY in this case, like the karyotyping picture, if you use the sperm, the same defect can inherit into the subsequent offspring. And regarding the Y deletion, this is the picture of a Y chromosome pictorial representation. The deletion can be 3 points A, B, C. The Y SZF A, B, spermic factor A, B, C. That is the SZF and B. The thing is that if there is this Y chromosome deletion, if the subsequent offspring is the male spring, the same Y chromosome get inherited into the subsequent male child, and the male child also can have the same Y chromosome problem, and the chromosome and the semen parameters can be there. So this is the in detail about the Y chromosome microdeletion. In Y SZF-A, that is succinic factor A, severe type of sertraline cell only syndrome. ZFC only, mild to moderate oligosperm, oligo to sertraline cell only syndrome. In the other, there can be combination of ZFB and C, where can maturation arrest and asuspermia. The importance, it can predict information on the successful sperm retrieval for ICSI. If it is as ZFC, retrieval of sperm is possible in 70%. As ZFA, the retrieval of sperm is very less likely to retrieve the sperm. And most common in infertile pain is one affecting the genetic factor in the ZFC region. So coming to the management part of male factor infertility, medical management, if there is hypothyroidism, like low thyroid, we have to supplement that. We have to correct the thyroid. If there is prolactin is high, we have to correct that. Usually, if I can go for a dopamine agonist like cabergoline or bromocriptine. And coming to the hormonal treatment, like it is indicated only in patients with hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism. In those patients, if the FSH and LH is low, definitely we have to start them with HCG injection, 2000 or 5000 units twice weekly for 2 months. The purpose is to stimulate the Leydig cells to produce the intratesticular testosterone. It must be followed with the HMG, with HCG, 75 unit along with that HCG twice weekly for 3 to 6 months. It stimulates to produce the sperm production from the testis. So the thing is that it is a costly treatment. Properly, we must identify the patient. We must counsel the patient that the treatment may take at least minimum 6 months. And at the end there may not be response in few patients. If we are properly diagnosing the patient, at least we can get enough few sperms to do the HC procedure or at least the IUI procedure. That is how we have to properly diagnose and treat and counsel and the patient the treatment. This has to be followed for nearly 6 months to get a proper result in those patients. So we must counsel the patient in properly. Initially, people were using pulsatile GnRH, but it is not much used now because if you use an infusion pump, it is not found to be very useful. It is very costly also. And coming to anti-estrogen therapy, indirectly stimulate the secretion of FSH and LH. It blocks the estrogen receptors in hypothalamus and pituitary and increases the GnRH release of FSH and LH from anterior pituitary. Anti-estrogens used were clomiphene citrate 25 to 50 milligram daily or tamoxifen. But there is a school of thought, a few people who doesn't use clomiphene, because when you use clomiphene, you must stop after a gap of 3 weeks so that it will stimulate the production of the FSH to coincide with the sperm production. So there are still people using that. And most commonly used, I think, is the fertility enhancing nutrients like L-carnitine, 0.7 lycopene, selenium, zinc, vitamin C, E, B2, and all. So oral antioxidant therapies, you can see different companies coming with different combinations, claiming that is better or not. So the basic function, it increases the concentration, motility, vitality, and sperm morphology parameters in some patients, not for all. Antioxidant treatment improves sperm quality by maintaining the DNA integrity in those patients. So that is basically because we have to know about oxidative stress in the male as a cause for male infertility. There are several things which can increase oxidative stress, like varicocele, infection, immunological, developmental or lifestyle factors. So when this is being proved beyond doubt that reactive oxygen species is found to be affecting the male sperm function, and ROS it has got a physiological and pathological role in the sperm function. So one thing we have to know is that if there is increased production of ROS, definitely it will affect the sperm function, and that lead to ATP depletion and oxidation of the proteins, and DNA fragmentation can occur in those patients. So low levels of oxidative stress in vitro enhances sperm hyperactivation or sperm capacitation or sperm reaction or sperm egg binding and sperm egg fusion and leading to fertilization. So the purpose of all antioxidants is to decrease the level of oxidative stress and the ROS factor in the sperm. So that is the importance of giving antioxidants. The purpose is to maintain or decrease the production of ROS in those patients. So if there is any infection, definitely we have to treat by antibiotic. If there is infection like pyospermia, usually WBCs, we saw in the seminal analysis report, we have to quantify that. It is more than 1 million per ml after staining. We have to do the seminal culture and sensitivity needed or go for cyclic antibiotics. Some people are using prostatic massage with that so that the infection is completely cured. Or lifestyle changes must be there, reduce like cigarette smoking or like that. And then also supplement with antioxidants like ubiquinol, L-carnitine, lycopene, and selenium, or zinc, or vitamin E or C has to be. And coming to the DNA sperm fragmentation, this has been lot of studies come. The thing is that DNA fragmentation is increased with infection or inflammation of the genital tract, varicocele, testicular maldesign, impairs spermatogenesis. So radiotherapy or chemotherapy or exposure to chemicals or heat and rarely idiopathy. The importance is that if the DNA fragmentation is more, we have to give antioxidants and we have to counsel the couple to go for an IUI procedure or at the earliest, even after antioxidant therapy. But there is no way to identify the sperm without DNA fragmentation, use that for ICSI. So it is just to, as a tool to counsel the patient so that they must go for antioxidant therapy and fasten a little, go for a RT treatment at the earliest. That's all. Then coming to the last part of the presentation, computer assessment of semen answer is CASA. It is developed to improve the accuracy of manual semen because it is, as I told, it is subjective. So, but the disadvantages is that it's not reliable if the sperm density is less than 2 million or if it is more than 50 million per ml, or if there is a lot of debris or immotile sperm, requires dilution if it is more than 40 million, and not need to record 200 sperms for accurate distribution of velocity. Parameters are not standardized between laboratories, so difficult to interpret the results. No improvement on manual method in distinguishing fertilization capacity of the sperm. The advantages is more objective and reproducibility between the different people who are seeing that. Superior documentation of the laboratory values and superior measurement of sperm volume. Otherwise, it is not found to be very superior and it is a little expensive gadget for a lab. Coming to the artificial insemination, there are intrauterine insemination is there, intracervical is there, pericervical or vaginal is there. Lastly, very difficult cases there, intraperitoneal insemination is there. So nowadays, with advent of good catheters, the need for direct peritoneal insemination is less. And whatever be that, it is more accepted is the intrauterine insemination. By using the intrauterine insemination, we are bypassing the vaginal hostility and concentrated good sperms are deposited near to the site of ovulation, at least inside near the tube, and we are removing the dead or necrotic tissue and anti-sperm antibodies is there. So that's why initially people were, even we were seeing the anti-sperm antibodies. Nowadays it is not much use because when you do the IUI procedure, we are clearing the anti-sperm antibody in that patient. And the success rate of IUI procedure is between 10 to 15% only, never more than 18%. That is the one thing we have to counsel them before going for this procedure. It is not useful when the semen is less than 1 million per ml. And evaluation, female evaluation is a must, at least basic female evaluation before going for IUI. A possible pelvic infection must be kept in mind, even though we are not supposed to use antiseptic lotion for cleaning before IUI. We have to thoroughly clean the vagina and do the intrauterine insemination properly and thoroughly prepare the semen in a proper andrology lab where the semen only is handled, not the fecal matter or blood or urine is handled, so that even it can cause pelvic infection if not done properly. So we will be doing harm to the patient rather than benefit to the patient for even for a subsequent pregnancy. So semen preparation, one slide about that. Usually washing method is done, but more accepted is a SIM-up method and density gradient consideration. Usually density gradient consideration with the semen parameters is very good, and SIM-up with the semen parameters is not. These are the most accepted. I'm not going to that in detail. And coming into assisted reproductive techniques, even though several types of GIFT, SIFT, SUSI, they all are more accepted is the conventional IVF procedure where one egg is mixed with 10 to 20,000 sperm, natural fertilization is allowed, or ICSI where to one egg, one sperm is injected using micromanipulator technique. So it is definitely indicated if there is severe male factor infertility or the previous fertilization failure in routine IVF is there. But in Indian context, most of the labs where the patient has to pay for the IVF treatment in India, they do, if the semen parameters is bad or the number of eggs is less, go for XC procedure for all those eight, or otherwise go for half the eggs for IVF and half the XC procedure. So to to conclude, you have to go for a detailed clinical history and physical examination and semen analysis. And if it is normal, semen function is needed only, DNA fragmentation only in indicated patients, and also female evaluation is needed. And if the semen analysis is abnormal, we have to exclude gonadotoxic drugs, endocrine evaluation if it is abnormal, additional testing like genetic evaluation or transrectal ultrasound only in doubtful cases, and in indicated cases as we discussed. And in azoospermia, you have to take a proper history, and if it is obstructive azoospermia, VAS will be usually absent. We have to rule out ideally any CFTR mutation, CFTR gene mutation, because it is associated with cystic fibrosis. Or non-obstructive azoospermia, we can go for a genetic testing to rule out any karyotype or Y chromosome defect in the patient. In undefined cases, we have to look for ejaculatory volume. If it is normal, we have to go for an azoospermia patient, go for see the testicular biopsy or epidermal biopsy. We have to retrieve the sperm. Otherwise, then we have to go for XC procedure. Otherwise, we have to exclude collection problem. And in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism patient, we have to go for an hormonal therapy in those patients. Or if the ejaculatory volume is low, if we have to if there is an ejaculation, we have to look for any associated orgasm is there. If orgasm is there, we can retrieve this sperm from the urine after properly alkalizing the urine in patients with retrograde ejaculation, or if or we have to proceed accordingly. So to conclude, we have to take a proper history and clinical examination, look for any treatable causes, and go for a definitive treatment if indicated, and get the confidence of the patient, and properly identify the condition and properly counsel what is the success rate of the patient, what is the cost incurred in the treatment, and time will treat. If everything is normal, we have to counsel the patient, we have to counsel about the fecundity of each cycle of maximum fecundity, what we can get with one cycle. Thank you for patient hearing. I think I tried to, because of restricted time in allotted 1 hour, I tried to cover all that. If you have doubt, we can clear.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And as you have said, so you have covered almost all the points, including algorithm. So thank you very much. It was a very nice presentation. And now it's open. I mean, the platform is open for the questions. So if there are any questions in the chat box, I will read it out to them. So to begin with, as you have mentioned, CASA technique for the semen analysis. So is this routinely used by at all the centers? I mean, what's the opinion?
No. Actually, it is not found to be very useful. It is an expensive equipment. Only if you cannot rely on the andrologist who can do a proper semen analysis only. Otherwise, it is an added tool in your laboratory. More documentation can be done, more reliability can be there, but it has got its own problem. It cannot be used if the count is very low, or it cannot be used if the count is too high also. So that is one drawback of the CASA method. Otherwise, it is not routinely needed. Not routinely advocated in all the andrology labs.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. So another question is, a lot of techniques are utilized for semen preparation. So are those techniques very useful in cryopreservation as well?
No. Cryopreservation is that it depends on the semen concentration, how you can retrieve the sperm. If the semen is got, they cryopreserve the semen with the special media. Usually, 1 ml of the semen is mixed with the 1 ml of the media and is stored. It is done routinely for all IVF patients because as a backup procedure, because if they cannot use the sperm of the day of who own it up, it will be a problem. That is one thing. Second thing is that a lot of patients, when the husband has to go because they cannot be there on the home pickup day or IUI day, we can do it. And more than that, in onco patients as a fertility preservation, before they are going for a chemotherapy or radiotherapy, or they comes to preserve the semen either before marriage or after marriage. They come and preserve the semen because when we cryopreserve, we can retrieve good number of sperms. If the initial count is reasonably good, we can even go for a IUI with that, or we can go for an ICSI procedure or ART procedures in that patient. So cryopreservation has got a big role rather than specific infertility treatment. It has got for a fertility preservation part also. They've got a wide role nowadays.
Right, sir. Thank you.
The only thing is that the awareness is not come to most of the people who are dealing with oncology. But now we get a lot of people from the oncologists nearby our center in Cochin. And that is because they counsel the patient. But only thing is that we need to get collect at 2 or 3 samples so that we can store. If the volume is less, we have to store in multiple times. Multiple containers. If you want to store about 10 ml, we have to get 10 ml from multiple masturbation samples. So the thing is that if unless the patient is not counseled properly, or initially itself before starting their chemotherapy or radiotherapy, they have to do that. That doesn't mean after chemotherapy or radiotherapy they'll have to use that. Sometimes if the testicular function is not impaired, they can still go for after 1 year. They can after the therapy, they can go for their own fresh sample collection. Or if it is compromised, they can use the cryopreserved semen for the future fertility purpose.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you very much. So there is a question from Dr. Madhu Ben, and the question is some more points on treating erectile dysfunction.
That is a vast topic by itself. The problem is that erectile dysfunction, definitely 2-3 things we have to see. We have to take a detail, not only that routine history, sexual history, whether they can masturbate properly, and we have to take a separate history from both wife and husband. So sometimes it can be just as a precipitating factor of following the vaginismus of the female, because if they try intercourse and if there is some vaginismus with affecting that, the male will be concentrating on the erection. Erection is always conscious control. So if once during intercourse, if the conscious goes for the erection, definitely the erection will go next time. So it became a more cyclical process that before they start to have proper penetration there, the erection goes off. So we have to approach the patient in detail. We have to rule out diabetes, rule out other diseases. If everything is normal, we can go for a tadalafil or sildenafil in this patient, provided no other contraindication for that. Otherwise, we have to first treat the vaginismus of the female, and then advise in proper sexual counseling is needed. We not only the clinician, we have a separate counselor also who sees all the new patients and all the sexual problem patients. It has to be combined approach, so then only we can overcome this problem. It is not like that you just treat them with an IVF procedure or an IVF procedure. That will be just a treatment for their fertility problem. But as a treatment for their sexual problem, which will be their lifelong problem, has to be tackled properly. So it will be more rewarding if you can properly identify. Now it is not very uncommon. Even doctors or software engineers married for 4 years, 5 years, or 7 years is coming with no history of proper intercourse. So that thing has to be properly where that's why I told infertility means it has to be a proper couple-based approach. That is the importance of that proper history in the infertility patients.
Right, sir. Thank you. So next question is from Dr. Victoria Johnston, and the question is: any role for a ratio of testosterone and estradiol?
There are some studies has come with that, but definitely if that depends on there are some studies about where you can treat with letrozole, but large studies are needed. That's why I'm not going into that. But definitely, if the testosterone alone is low, you have to look for the especially these hypogonadotropic hypogonadism patients or the loss of libido patients. Definitely, we can substitute with testosterone, but when we give substitute testosterone for loss of libido, usually we have, if the patient is taking for more than 1 month, it has got a negative feedback effect. It will affect the sperm production and the sperm function, sperm count and motility will be affected if you are using testosterone supplements for more than 1 month. Okay.
So any particular additional point apart from your presentation? Any additional newer techniques you wanted to discuss?
I think my advice is that if you are into infertility patients, we have to see both the couple. We must, even if you are, female gynecologist, if you are into infertility patients, we must start to just see the male factor, basic male examination must be done, because infertility treatment is not complete without a proper couple approach. If you cannot do that, we must refer to a doctor or urologist who sees the male factor as a basic evaluation for all infertile patients we see. And proper male evaluation is needed, even though patient tells that okay, it is my female tells it is their problem, or if it is there is a fibroid is there, if it is a endometriosis there. Most of the time, it may be due to the male factor or male subtle factor, which is leading to infertility, and that is that infertility has aggravated their myoma factor or the endometriosis factor. So that is the one we have to see that we have to, or we have to take in the other way also. If you are treating the female factor, unless the male factor is not corrected, they will not get a proper result. If it is an endometriosis, if you are not anticipating, or if you are just male factor, if you are leaving the female after the surgery, definitely after 1 year or within 1 year, if it is severe endometriosis or endometriosis with additions, it is going to come again. So we have to treat the or assess the male factor also if you are treating the female factor, or we have to, even if it is male factor, we have to basically do the basic evaluation of female factor has to be needed.
Right, so thank you. So basically both male and female evaluations to be done simultaneously. That is the advice you are giving. So I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation. You have covered all the points, few questions as well. And it was an honor for Shield to have you as a speaker. And we are looking forward more such presentations and webinars with you, sir, in the future. So thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you, Shield, for giving the opportunity. Thank you all for logging in.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you very much, sir.